and back and forth and talk sports, which is one of my favorite topics. And my next guest, I was really impressed with him. I saw him on a Zoom session. It was a seminar for a group I'm involved with called Dunkers. And this guy has a very big brain, and thank goodness the Minnesota Twins have him on staff. He was named assistant general manager in January of this year. He is Daniel Adler, and he's responsible for heading up the club's baseball research and development efforts. And we're going to talk sports analytics with him today. Daniel, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Thank you very much for having me, Roshini. I'm really honored to be here.
Well, you never know how someone's going to take in your information. And that's why I think, for me as an executive coach, I'm always listening and watching and see how people deliver. And you really delivered on that Dunkers session, which made me reach out and say, please come on my show. Because this whole topic of sports analytics, it's really a hot topic. You're in the thick of it. But let's be real. This turned out to be a disappointing year for the Twins. So,
yeah, it was.
So put that in perspective for us.
It was a tough end. We went into
an end. Yes, the end.
We thought the season would be 162 games and ended up only being 60. So from an analytics perspective, immediately that adds a little more randomness than usual. And we felt like we put together a really good team, and we won the division. Played really well. There were some teams in our division, probably especially the White Sox, who were a little better than we expected them to be. Then we got into the playoffs, and that 3-game series, it was certainly not kind to us. And we played a team in the Astros that coming into the season probably looked like one of the strongest teams in baseball. They stumbled over the 60-game season, but as you saw, they not only beat us, they won the next series. I think they had a really talented team. So I think it was certainly a very bitter end, and now we've had a couple years of getting swept in that first series of the playoffs, a couple of years straight. But I think we're hopeful to build a team that is as good or better next year, and hopefully can really make some noise in the playoffs.
Right. And I certainly don't mean to put you on the defensive, but, on Real Talk with Roshini, we get real, and listeners text in and, they knew that you're coming on and they've got these kinds of questions. So what are sports analytics for people who don't really understand? What are you tracking?
So we are tracking everything. I think most simply, analytics is kind of a fancy word for information and using data to make decisions, trying to go supplement our gut, which is generally a great decision-making unit, but supplement that with data and make sure there aren't things that we're misremembering or weighing a little too heavily in our minds. And so use that information based on what's happened in the past, try to project out and make good decisions in the future, whether those decisions are how to position our outfielders or which free agent to sign or which player to draft.
All right. And so there have been, at least initially when analytics were getting some buzz, there were a lot of critics that came out and said, okay, we still have to have the human touch. So because, you're a very well-educated person, you have your own brain on this. How do you match that human touch or mesh with the numbers and the stats?
I think it starts with having a lot of humility, and hopefully both sides, both the people who have deep experiences in that human touch, hopefully they have humility, and certainly it's incredibly important for our analysts to have humility. And when we build a model, understanding that we're not capturing everything. We don't know. Our model doesn't know if the player, for example, had a really rough night and is going through some difficult personal things. That could certainly impact performance. And it's incumbent on us as analysts to listen to coaches, players, others with really deep experience in the game and try to hear what they're saying and find out where our models may need some extra information and be ready to adjust. Now, at the same time, that doesn't mean we're going to adjust entirely to back where we started. We kind of at that initial gut feel. We want to figure out how can we blend the best of the two.
Yeah, I love it. I'm talking with Daniel Adler. He is Assistant General Manager of the Minnesota Twins, our hometown team. You can listen to them on WCCO Radio. We are their radio partner, and it's awesome when you do catch these games. But, we're getting some texts coming in, which we'll get to those. If you have questions and texts for Daniel, 651-989-9226. I want to, though, first ask you about some of the definitions, Daniel, because those are important. These are the numbers that you're looking at. And something that I learned from watching your Zoom talk few weeks ago is this WAR statistic, wins above replacement. Tell people what that means and how do you use it now as you are going to be tracking and getting this next team into play for our lineup next season.
So WAR is it's calculated in a few different ways, but the idea of WAR is to put every player, all of their contributions on the same scale. So how can you compare a pitcher who throws 190 innings with a 2.5 ERA to a position player who gets on base 40% of the time and hits 35 home runs? WAR helps you do that. Also includes base running, fielding. So we really try to roll everything up into this one number, and it's calculated a little differently. There's some websites, Fangraphs, Baseball Reference, the Twins internally, we calculate our own WAR, but the goal for all of them is to put everybody on the same scale and put it on this scale called wins above replacement. And a replacement player in this case is essentially a player who you could get for free, somebody who would be a free agent, who would be around the minimum salary. And so the question is, how many wins is a player providing above that replacement player, above that free player who you could sign basically at the minimum salary? And so in terms of the scale, if you have a player who's at 5 or 6 or 7 WAR over a season, that is elite. That's kind of MVP level type season. If you have a player who's sort of in the 3 to 5 range, those are your really, really strong players. You can build a great team of those players. And then an average player is probably going to be somewhere, a solid average starter is probably going to be somewhere in the 2 to 3 range. And so when we look at our team, we try to think about what is the WAR we have projected for the entire team, and then we can actually use that to determine how good we think we are. Do we think we're going to win? Do we think we're going to win 90 games, 95, 100? So that's essentially WAR tries to put everybody on the same scale, and then it can be very useful for projecting how good your team is. Now, of course, there are large error bars on this. We came into the 2019 season, for example, thinking we were a good team. We didn't think we would win over 100 games. We had a number of players perform better than we expected.
Daniel Adler, some sometimes tough concepts, but very well explained. And now those who didn't know about WAR have some interesting fun facts for their next Zoom happy hour or Thanksgiving conversation. All right, here's a text that came in, and I wish this person had put their name in there. This is a recent MBA grad who's wondering, any chance you're looking to hire someone in analytics at the Twins?
So we are. We have a number of fellowship positions, typically aimed at earlier career people and recent graduates, although certainly open to everybody. Fellowship positions in our research and development group that I believe are still open. We are in the process of hiring those roles now, but if you go on the Twins website, twinsbaseball.com, at the bottom there's a link to job opportunities, and throughout the entire organization we're hiring a number of interns and fellows. I believe on the business side there's also some analytics opportunities, so there are a handful of positions available right now.
Yeah, and recent grad, if you text me your name, we can tell Daniel before we have to say goodbye to him so he can keep an eye out for your application. All right, let's get to football because this was it's been a tough couple weeks for Minnesota football. So let's just start with the Gophers Friday night. And, I just thought that they would win that game after that big comeback, Daniel. How do analytics in football compare with baseball? Are they completely apples and oranges, or can we learn from some of the things you told us today when it comes to football?
Certainly plenty of similarities at the base of it, trying to overcome some of our biases. Certainly for any Gophers fan, that the end of that game is going to loom large in your memory, and maybe next time it comes time to make a point after touchdown, even though the stats would probably say, hey, this is a 97% make percentage in college, you're going to remember that, and it's going to maybe feel more like 50-50. And so analytics certainly can help overcome that type of bias that may enter your head. But there are football fundamentally is probably a more difficult game to capture analytically than baseball in a lot of ways. That's largely because you have 22 players running around on the field and so many different interactions impacting the outcome of a play. If a running back runs for an 80-yard run and a touchdown, if Dalvin Cook does that, was that Dalvin Cook making a beautiful play? Was that actually because the play before the defense realized they wanted to key in on a wide receiver and needed to draw their attention there, and so it was actually much easier for them? Is it because a linebacker fell down? Is it because of a great block? There's so many different things that go into it, and it's very hard. That WAR number, that concept that we have in baseball where we try to say, here is precisely how much a player was worth to the team in terms of the team's outcomes. Much, much more difficult in football because it's so collaborative. Not impossible. And certainly people with the Vikings, who have really one of the best research and development groups in football, they're making a lot of progress in this area, but it's much more difficult to capture, certainly individual contributions. And then layer on the fact that the season at NFL is only 16 games. College this year for the Gophers will be much, much shorter than that. There's just a lot more randomness. We talked about this at the top with a 60-game season being more random than 162. Well, when you shrink that down to 16 games, and you can think about it, and this year certainly hasn't been a kind one to the Vikings, but just a few bounces of a ball can really, really impact things. Whereas in baseball, generally over 162 games, certainly luck plays a role, but it would be hard to look back and say, oh, if these two things had just gone slightly different, we're going to win 30% more games. Whereas in football, that's actually very, very possible.
Wow. Well, great stuff. Daniel Adler, he is Assistant General Manager of the Twins. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you come back as we're getting ready for spring training, because it will be really fun to talk with you as the whole roster is taking shape.
Excellent. I hope spring training and everything is on schedule, and that would be great. Please let me know when I can join again. Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time.